I want to welcome you to this leadership salon here at Red Line Gallery. I'm Lynn Gangone. I'm Dean of the University of Denver's Women's College, and I will be serving tonight as your facilitator for this fabulous panel of thought leaders with the topic Democracy Betrayed, Women and Violence. This is part of a series that has been prompted and influenced by the fact that the University of Denver is hosting the first presidential debate this October 3rd. And for those of you who have questions about tickets, I will tell you that I don't even know how to get them. But really, one of the lovely things about the fact that we're hosting the debate is not only does it place national attention on the University of Denver and Denver as a community in Colorado as one of those swing states, but in fact, the debate commission really wants to see students at the event. So they are actually the primary recipients, if you will, of that day. So just to belie any questions you might have about tickets, just wanted to put that at ease. But what happened when we secured the debate is that we had an opportunity to think about what are the great issues of the day and how do we elevate those issues. So each of the academic units at the university has engaged in a series of activities to say, these are the great issues of the day, and let's be in conversation with one another. Because in an age of email and iPhones and Blackberries, we text and we email, but we don't talk to one another. So we wanted to elevate the conversation around the great issues of the day in conversation. That was our first goal. And our second goal as a women's college was to say, who are the thought leaders on any particular topic who happen to be women? Women are not typically seen as the experts, even still today in this 21st century. And so as a women's college, our goal is to invite men and women into conversation about the great issues of the day, but our podium is held by women. And so I thank you for coming here tonight, and I thank you for being willing to be in conversation in this gorgeous gallery. This is our first, I think, presidential debate event that is outside of the University of Denver campus and in the community. And I want to thank Laura Mirage for her vision in creating this gorgeous gallery, in bringing this exhibit to our community, and more importantly to me for a long-term partnership that I know will exist between the Women's College, the University of Denver, and Red Line. I think this is a great way for us to start bringing our conversations out into community by being in Red Line. So please, a hand for Laura Mirage. Thank you. I also want to thank the Abdullah Family Foundation and the Women's Coalition of the University of Denver, who assisted the college in being a major sponsor for this exhibit, Off the Beaten Path. This is not an easy topic that we are undertaking to discuss today, nor is this at times an easy exhibit to absorb. But I admire our bravery, each and every one of us, in being here and appreciating the art and in being in conversation. And it's that bravery, I think, that is part and parcel of a women's college student. We have a vision at the Women's College that we intend to educate women to be bold leaders in the communities where they live, where they work, and where they engage. So in addition to getting an undergraduate degree, we have an expectation that our students actually want to create some change in the world, and to do so on behalf of girls and women. And so before we begin with the salon, I'd like to introduce Michelle Tyson, who will take just a few minutes to tell you a little bit more about the Women's College and our goals in terms of the women we want to invite into our community.
Great, thank you. I'm really excited to have so many members from the community here, and I'm gathering that probably not everybody knows about the Women's College, or for just a minute, I want you to think about all branching out to the community? Do you have daycare providers that you like to spend time with for a hobby? Women in your community. And I'm going to ask you that when you think of these women, you think about what is their background. I'm going to ask that you think about a woman who maybe has returned from serving our country. She's settling back into her life. She's gained great leadership skills. She's had real neat experiences, but she might not know how valuable those are. She doesn't have a college degree, but she could from the Women's College. Think about a woman you know who's been in community college for a couple of years. She's struggling to work, attend school part-time, raise a family. Who is this woman in your life? She's learning how to manage things. She's learning how to become a leader in her own life. She needs to go bigger. She needs to go further. She doesn't have a college degree, but she could from the Women's College. Think of a woman you know who perhaps just graduated high school within the last couple of months. She has so much potential for education. She wants her education. She has a dream of attending a university. For whatever reason, she's not able to pursue that dream at this exact time in going to university. She has family responsibilities. Perhaps she's contributing to the income of her family. Perhaps she's helping raise brothers and sisters while her parents have the income for the family. She's going to settle for a community college, which is a great option, but it's not what she wants. She wants to attend university, and she can by getting her degree at the Women's College. Lastly, think of a woman in your life who started college years ago. She took a small break, what was supposed to be a short break. She chose to go on and have kids and become an instrumental part of their community. She's doing things like being a homeroom mom. She's a soccer mom. She's managed so much in her life, and she's gaining great leadership skills. That short-term break turned into a long-term break, and she still hasn't returned to school. She can get her degree from the Women's College. Our students, and I look around the room and I see many of them here tonight. Actually, can we just take a moment? If you're a student of Women's College, would you mind standing up for just a moment? And an alum, of course. Our friends who are undergraduates. Thank you. They didn't know I was going to call attention to them, but I figured since I'm talking about our students, we should acknowledge those in the room. So thank you, I appreciate that. In case you don't know that much about the Women's College, we offer classes on evenings, weekends, and during the day. It is not unusual that a woman is rushing to class in the evenings after working a full day of work. It's not unusual that a woman's rushing to class on a Saturday morning after soccer games. I'm that woman. It is not unusual that a woman's going to attend classes on a Sunday afternoon after a church service in the morning. This is our community. This is who our students and who our women are at the Women's College. So as you think about those women in your life, think about the Women's College. Refer them to us. Refer us to them. I really feel we can make a difference in the lives of the women that are in our community, and I think you're the best source to start taking our message out there into the community after tonight. I want to thank you for the few moments that you've given me to put in a little plug. I've actually only been at the Women's College for about 6 months now, and I'm blown away every single day at what we're able to accomplish and who our students are walking in the door. You might notice in the front of the building tonight we have a table set up with all of our marketing materials and promotional items. So if you are thinking of a woman here in this room tonight, grab those materials, take them with you, and please spread them around. We're always looking for additional women to help broaden our community and make our community better. Just one last little piece is it's never too late. You can always apply to go to college, and at the Women's College, we are welcoming students year-round. So with that, I'm going to turn things back over to our dean. Thank you, and enjoy the evening.
We love our community so much, we want to share it. So, thank you, Michelle. Let me introduce our panelists, and let me tell you a little bit about the format for this evening. We will be in conversation with one another first, and then we will open it up for conversation between the audience and our panelists. Our goal is to be in conversation. This is not a panel where you will have singular answers and then move on to the next person. I have gently encouraged all of our panelists to interact with one another, and I have no doubt that they will. Their bios are at your seat. I will not belabor the extraordinary achievements of each of these women, but let me introduce them to you so that you know who each of them are. To my immediate left is Laura Mirage, who you have met previously, and thank you again, Laura, for this gorgeous gallery and for your vision, truly. To her left is Dr. Anjanette Alejano Steele. To her left is Sarah Wallace Scott. And in introducing Sarah, I also want to remind our guest here this evening that the elephant rising matriarch is yet to be complete. You can still write on a piece of parchment your vision for girls and women. That is Sarah's piece. It is a gorgeous piece of art, both in what it represents as well as in the artistic quality of the sculpture itself. And Rebecca Hanley. So let me open up our conversation first by giving some context and perspective, some facts. So nationally, domestic violence is the leading cause of injury for women ages 15 to 44. Approximately 1.3 million women and 835,000 men are physically assaulted by an intimate partner annually. There were 3,191 military sexual assaults reported, and I underline reported, in 2011. The Pentagon estimates that the actual number was probably closer to, my goodness, I don't even want to tell you what they think it is. Boys who witness domestic violence are twice as likely to abuse their own partners and children when they become adults. In our own backyard in Colorado, 1 in 6 households is affected by domestic violence. And 1 in 4 women in Colorado become victims of sexual assault. Almost 1/2 of all murders in Colorado are committed by an intimate or former intimate partner, and the victims are disproportionately female. And finally, and I think we know this, but it bears repeating, victims of domestic violence are found in all walks of life. It occurs among all socioeconomic classes, is not bounded by ethnicity, religious, or social background, or sexual orientation. The perpetrator of violence in a relationship is a man in 97% of domestic assaults. Like so many of these issues that we are raising in these leadership salons, it impacts men and women, boys and girls. Laura, I want to first open up with inviting you, as an artist, philanthropist, and founder of Redline, to answer the first question, which is to briefly frame your personal story in the context of bringing Off the Beaten Path to Redline.
Thank you, Lynn. I come to this very recently, and by saying this, I mean this realization that so much of the stories and issues with women and violence portrayed against women in our world is not something that happens to other people and across the world, but I literally, suddenly, within a matter of minutes, realized that this is my family's history, and with that, my story. How I came to that was when we decided to bring this wonderful exhibition to Redline. we began to meet with different organizations and institutions to raise funds to make it possible to bring it to Redline. And at every meeting, PJ and I, PJ is the executive director of Redline, we sat down, we talked to the people across the table, and then showed a little video. It's a 2.5-minute video put out by Girl Effect, which is done by Nike organization. And if you haven't seen it, please do go online and see Girl Effect video. It's a cartoon type video, stick figures that show what's happening in the most of the world. By the time a girl turns 14, they are considered of married engaged, they're married off, and all the consequences of being married off at the age of 14, unhealthy relationships and bodies, and high possibility of catching AIDS, and oftentimes that girl will have to sell her body to help raise her kids, and on and on. And he says, what if we turn it back, and instead of marrying off that girl at the age of 14 or 15, we kept her in school. And this becomes a positive cycle instead of negative. So about the 12th, 14th, 16th time that we were showing this video, I kind of tuned off. And I was daydreaming as everybody was looking away from me in the darkened room. And suddenly, my tears began to come down. And I had no idea why. I had no idea why. I was very upset. Oh, wow, Laura, get a hold of yourself. You know, you're sitting here with all these people you barely know. The video is going to finish now. Well, whatever I did, I couldn't stop myself. And I just said, well, stay with it then and see what's going on. And I realized, after all this time, at the age of 53, that, yeah, this is the story of the women in my family, my grandparents, my ancestors, my mother, my sisters. And what do I mean by that? That I suddenly realized that they were married off at the age of 12, 14, and even 9. And I never thought about it in these terms, even though I knew it. I never thought about the travesty of it. Because that's how it was. I was born in Iran, and that was how it was. All families did that for generations after generations. And it was only at that moment that I realized, wow, this is not the issue of culture. It's not the issue of it's done. This is disaster. This is travesty, and it has affected me. It has affected me, and it is why I do the art that I do. So that's my story. And this happened only 6 months ago, so I'm still learning to live with it. A lot of soul searching going on. A lot of conversations with family, with women in the family who at the beginning quickly shut the doors. No. It has nothing to do with you. And it does. So every day is a new discovery.
It is, you know, one of the things I take away when I hear your story, Laura, is the way in which the cultural context for something somehow renders it legitimate. And yet that isn't always the case. I'm seeing heads nod. And I actually, given that, I'm actually going to skip out of order, so sorry, panelists, I'm just doing this because I feel compelled. You know, Becky, I'm going to follow up with you, because I think that in your research, Becky is a recent graduate of the Women's College, and Becky did a paper for her capstone project that explored the effects of language and media. Again, another cultural phenomena, right, in terms of how we view what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. So Becky's research was on the effects of language and media on the acceptance of rape myths. And so, Becky, I'm moving to you second now, to have you address how you see language of rape that's often used by news outlets and the ways in which it perpetuates a tolerance of rape in our culture.
There's two large examples that I feel really perpetuate the tolerance that our culture ultimately has, whether it's rape or sexual violence. One is the language that's used when reporting on a situation. For example, they tend to use consensual sex language. What I mean by that is they will report that he or she performed sex. Perform implies consent. That's not what occurred in that particular situation. He or she was truly victimized. He or she was raped, and violently usually. But the reporters don't use that type of language. Instead, they use this language that perpetuates this idea where our society is going to automatically look at the victim, usually a woman, and we're going to ask ourselves, what did she do to put herself in that situation? Because they're painting the picture of she wore a short skirt and she had a lot to drink that night, and she went home with him and she performed sex with him. Well, if it's a different type of crime, we rarely read a case where it says something like, well, they just painted their house and it got broken into. We don't ask those questions when it's a different type.
So the idea is we've made the house more attractive,
Right.
And so therefore we're breaking into it.
Right. So, but we
not
don't
to
do that.
equate women with a house.
Not to equate women with a house.
Right, but that's what they're doing. But that's what they're doing with the woman. They're saying she wore the skirt, she wore the heels, she wore the makeup, she plied herself, with all this alcohol. So the language we're using perpetuates the blaming of the victim, which allows our culture to say, well, only bad girls get raped. The second situation that I came across is 80% of rapes are by someone they know. It's an acquaintance rape. Yet 75% of images and storylines on primetime television have stranger rape. It's always the boogeyman hiding in the bushes who jumps out and attacks her. That's not the reality of rape. It happens, but it's very limited. 80% of rape is by someone the victim knows. And we're not doing anything in our culture to say that's not good, that's not healthy. We're not reflecting the problem. We're not reflecting the story of Laura. We're not reflecting the story of the victims. And it's also very interesting what they do report on. Take, for example, I'm not sure how many people heard about the Cleveland, Texas case about the 14-year or 12-year-old girl who was gang raped by approximately 20 gentlemen. I use that term loosely. But Sandusky and what he did was all over the paper. And of course, there can be a different argument as to why one is reported and one is not. But both are just as violent, and we're not saying we need these stories. We need to hear what's going on. We need to change our language so that we can change our understanding and truly understand what's going on in society.
It reminds me of the ways in which some of the violence against women is really portrayed in common media, in games, in a lot of the electronic gaming. I mean, the way in which we just accept this as normal behavior. AJ, I'm sorry, Ann Jeanette. I've known AJ for a very long time, so I'm just going to call you AJ. AJ is been working in the Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking. Did I get that name correct? And so an important part of this conversation is human trafficking. And there are so many myths and misunderstandings about human trafficking. I wonder if you could begin to share some of those with our guests tonight.
Absolutely, and maybe I will piggyback off of your piece in terms of the ways in which media really portrays that. And so just to give that quick definition, something to wrap your head around, we're talking about a severe form of exploitation, usually in the form of labor or sex, through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. So to summarize that, that's looking at people who are working against their will, whether that be in the commercial sex industry or labor in terms of agriculture. But similar to what you're sharing is that portrayal of how people come to that issue and that big myth that it happens overseas. It happens in Thailand, it happens in the Philippines. If it happens in the United States, it's in New York City or Los Angeles, and certainly not in Colorado. But I assure you, given our research and our work over the last 7 years, and our work with survivors to attend college at Metropolitan State University, they are here, and they're born in Colorado, and they are born overseas. And so just to share that piece, there's just still this pushing away of what this issue is and confusing it with smuggling, confusing it with a form of domestic violence or a form of immigration violation. It's complicated because it intersects with all of those, but it is its own distinct crime. So I appreciate the time in including this particular form of violence in this salon, in this conversation. So to break those stereotypes about overseas, men and boys are also trafficked, and women and girls are traffickers. And there is no stereotype, there is no profile, and it is happening here.
Tell me a little bit more, because I mean, this was one of, I think, there's a way in which in these difficult conversations, whether it's about domestic violence, whether it's about sexual assault, whether it's about human trafficking, we want to distance ourselves from this. I know for myself, this is just never an easy topic. It's just not easy. And I always want to put it over there. I always want to have it be someone else or some other community or remove it from my sphere. What is happening in Colorado? I mean, most people wouldn't think that we were a hub in the United States for human trafficking, but we are.
Absolutely. And so we also want to be sure to be truthful that we're not talking about thousands of people being trafficked in and out of Colorado. There are some challenges in terms of finding those numbers. However, I invite everybody to think about those places of vulnerability around the state and what we're known for. So things like agriculture and things like affluent communities that hire nannies and cooks and cleaning ladies and restaurant workers. And to, again, break some of the stereotype around that sex trafficking piece, because that compels people in really strange sort of ways, because it mixes sex and violence and rescue and youth. But labor trafficking is alive and well. It's sheep herders and, again, restaurant workers, people who work in these industries that do affect us directly. Some people can remove themselves from the sex industry because who would get involved with that? But to talk about labor trafficking is to say, who made my dress? Who made my shoes? Who ground the coffee beans in my Starbucks coffee this morning? That to think about labor trafficking and to echo off of you is to say, where is my place in the consumption of wanting cheaper goods? So I invite everybody to think about this state and the tourism that comes through, and I-70 and I-25, that we are one of those locations that people come through us as well.
Will you help me understand this a little bit better? This is all really new to me, and if you could help me visualize, walk me through it. So we are at the center of all these highways and freeways, but what does that mean? Girls come through and somebody grabs them and forces them into hard labor? Or if you could spell it out a little bit better, because I really don't know.
And so one of the ways that human trafficking can be framed is through kidnaps. So when you say grabbing the girl, certainly that may be one way of overcoming somebody and taking them against their will. But I'd really like you all to also think about the other ways in which force, fraud, and coercion can happen. That can be an older boyfriend saying, I love you and I will take care of you, and maybe you came from a home, or maybe you've fled from a terrible experience of rape or incest, and I'll take care of you. And then that evolves into, well, we need to make money for the family. And we can prostitute you because that's fast money. But some of that is through the dynamic of relationship. How do I use this relationship to get her under my control? So I'm just giving one example. There are many others. There are ways of taking passports and threatening people psychologically and tying them to radiators. So there are different forms of that.
Listening to this does make me think of the title of the Salon, Democracy Betrayed, truly, because of the way in which we have set ourselves up as a country where these are not, that there are a set of freedoms around who we are and our right to exist, and yet we see violence and slavery still happening. I want to move on to Sarah, because I think that we need to honor the fact that we are in space that has used art to convey a message, to perhaps be a catalyst for change. And Sarah Wallace-Scott, as one of the local artists, if not the only, are you the only local artist to be exhibiting as part of this Off the Beaten Path?
Well, there was the About Feeling show.
Right.
And that was, I think, all local artists. And I'm not sure that the Rising Matriarch is actually considered a part of this exhibition, but it was certainly inspired in part of.
Could you talk a little bit about your work as an artist and whether or not art can, in fact, be a catalyst for change?
Certainly. I think that art most certainly is a catalyst for change in two ways. One is that it can, well, it certainly has the ability to change people's perception, and whether that's the artist's perception that's being changed or the viewer's perception. So for myself as an artist, certainly my perception is changed constantly. When I begin a project, I might have a certain idea set about, and inevitably you encounter problems in which you have to creatively find solutions in order to make it successful. You have to keep an open mind so that what you set out to do isn't working, so you can shift and it develops into something else. And also I think in the repetitive action of working in detail or at craft, you sort of enter into a space where it almost becomes like a muscle, and you start thinking more sensitively about your personal journey, your future, the people around you, that kind of thing. And I think especially for people who may not be professional artists but are given the opportunity to participate in art, gives them a creative outlet and also is a safe place to express themselves. It often is a really wonderful way to participate in a conversation that you weren't necessarily invited to participate in. And it's also wonderful for people that are viewing the work itself. I think anytime that you go to a film or see a performance or listen to music or are in a gallery and you're trying to take in or experience the work, that you are asking questions, and I think that just by opening yourself up to trying to discover what this work is about, and there may be times when you don't understand a work, but in the very act of opening yourself up to it, you're allowing an opportunity for your perception to be changed. And certainly there are many artists who are now working deliberately to try and use art as an agent for social change. And I think that that's happening more and more frequently and is really a quite wonderful thing. So, and then I guess I should continue with that. I feel compelled to move into the project that I have here, which is the Rising Matriarch Project, which for a while I had been wanting to do a community collaboration. And when this show came to Redline, we always, or typically are given an opportunity as resident artists to participate in some component of it. And I had looked at the exhibition online and realized that there wasn't any work or work addressing trans and lesbian issues in the show. And I thought, well, that seems strange for a show that's addressing violence against women. And so I was sort of upset by that and decided that that was what I wanted to pursue. And I was watching a video of Tony Blair and the Liberian president, I always forget her first name, but Sirleaf, President Sirleaf, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. And the journalist was asking sort of about the law in Liberia that criminalizes homosexuality and about these executions and what they call corrective rape. And her answer was basically, well, we like things the way that they are. We have traditional values that we would like to have kept. And she had just won the Nobel Peace Prize for her work in women's safety and women's rights. And I was just like, what? And so I decided at that point that I wanted to create an African elephant because it would very literally be the elephant in the room and hopefully force conversation. And also that it would represent African women in sort of also a literal way, but also symbolically, and elephants to me have always been wonderful symbols of matriarchs. They're wise and powerful and stunning, and they take care of each other so beautifully. And so I sort of sought out on that path and was having difficulty making connections with community groups along those lines. And I went to the breakfasts and saw the Nike video, and then you also, Laura, emailed me a link to a documentary on Half the Sky. It's a book also, and I went to the library and got that book and read it and was devastated and blown away. And then my perception also expanded to include everyone, because at that moment I felt very privileged to be a lesbian woman in Denver, and I have the support of my community, and yes, I'm aware that there are people of my group that are being harmed, but that there's women all over the world who aren't even acknowledged as human beings. They don't have the right to an education or to health care, and they're kidnapped and taken away from their families, and just devastating. So I decided that this elephant was then going to represent all women, and all women in our community. And I wanted to equip her with stories of hope and stories of hate, and give her compassion and support, and to be representative of this young woman who was going to go out into the world and be a survivor and a contributor. And I wanted that support to come from the community, which is where the messages came into. And then Louise got wind of what I was planning and helped me make the connection with the Women's College, and that's how it was able to happen. And it's been a really powerful, really beautiful experience, and I'm so happy, and the messages have been extraordinary. So.
And I was trying to share with Sarah, just as we were sitting up here and adjusting the mics, and I will do this shameless pitch on Sarah's behalf. It's cathartic. I was able to come to the opening of the exhibit, and to take on this beauty and this heaviness, it needs to go somewhere. And so for me, I was sharing with Sarah, I'd lost my mother suddenly in October, and it was just this beautiful way of being able to talk to my 10-year-old and honor my mother, and to take this in and to be able to put that message on there. So if you have not visited that, this is my shameless pitch on her behalf. You need to take all that and get it on that paper to put on the elephant, because you will feel better. So I thank you for having that outlet, for being able to release some of that.
Well, I thank you for contributing.
The elephant, by the way, is to my left as you're walking through the gallery, so please take the time to write and be part of Rising Matriarch. I got to tell you, I have never heard the term corrective rape. I have never heard that term. And the fact that we can even use that as a term is, to me, I mean, it brought tears to my eyes to even think about that concept. And yet, so much of that violent act is to correct, right? To correct a woman's behavior, to correct a young boy's behavior to perpetuate power in a way that is just unbelievably unacceptable, to have wars where rape is a weapon. I mean, it's extraordinary, and it happens every day. It happens here, it happens in Liberia, it happens to those who are seen as powerless by those who claim power. And so to bring us into conversation, if you will, around this theme of democracy betrayed, this notion that somehow democratic systems may have unintended consequences for vulnerability in these areas. Can you talk, any of you, about what you see as some of the unintended consequences that are happening right here in this country and around the world? It's mind-boggling.
Well, I come from a culture that believed that a woman needs to get a beating at least once a week to know her place. And when I was a child, most of the country, not true, some of the country had kind of stopped believing in that. We were fast moving towards Western mentality and education and modernism. And look at Iran today. The country has moved back easily 300 years, easily 300 years. Women not only are beaten, they're expected to be beaten. A man is not thought of as strong if he doesn't beat his wife on a regular basis. Women cannot have passports. When they want to travel, they have to get permission from their husbands. When they want to do just about anything, they have to get permission from their husbands. So what are the consequences? Countless, countless. And when I think about it, we think, well, that happens on the other side of the world. It doesn't affect us here. You know, that notion is not true anymore. Suddenly, the globe is so connected that we feel the vibrations of what happens anywhere on the globe, right here in our backyards. And unfortunately, what I see, and I hope it's not true, but it seems like in so many parts of the world, we are going the wrong direction instead of getting better, like in Iran, like in the United States, like in Afghanistan. They used to have little girls get married at 14 and 15, maybe 12. Now it's 6. So horrible consequences, terrible situation.
I don't think a lot of the problems are still just in the Middle East or in Africa. I think we still have these problems in the United States. It's just we color it differently. I think it's much more insidious what happens here. Yes, we have laws, that protect women, and it's rare to see a 6-year-old or a 14-year-old getting married, but we still have a culture that objectifies women. To me, it's a very simple idea of you either treat a person like a human or you don't. And women are not always treated as human beings. They are objectified. And that's how we have the human trafficking. That's how we have the sex assault and the rapes. And it's an age-old problem. And I think even with democracy, we're still trying to play catch-up. We're still trying to figure out, where do women fit into this? What can a woman bring to this? And I think while America has made a lot of progress, and I'm proud and glad that I don't have some of the problems that exist elsewhere, the reality is women still fit in one of two roles in this country, generally speaking. And we have to break from those molds. You're either a good girl or a bad girl, and you're either sexualized or not sexualized. And I think it's just more insidious, whereas these other countries, there's no shame about it. It is what it is, whereas we tend to hide it and just name it something a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe I'll throw in one more example in the realm of trafficking. So in New York City or New York, they are proposing a bill where in the name of protection of women being sex trafficked, they are proposing a bill that would punish cab drivers if they help facilitate a sex transaction. Again, so understanding in the name of protection, because in the field we know that there are people who are helping make these transports possible, one. But what that means then is that makes cabbies profile women, and if we happen to be dressing a certain way, the unintended consequence is that women who dress the wrong way or dress like a prostitute may be identified by a cab driver, right? In the name of protections on human trafficking, that would be one example, that it wouldn't just affect and protect those potentially being trafficked, but it could be any of us who's dressing with too short a skirt or behaving in ways after the bar closes that would make us potential criminals in that profiling. And then the last thing I want to add to that I'm going to actually borrow from our executive director, Amanda Finger, who's here. We were talking about democracy this afternoon, and it's this piece of the flip side, is we get to have this salon. We get to talk without repercussion. We get to be in this beautiful exhibit, in this beautiful gallery without feeling like somebody is watching us, or that someone can come and do something just because we're speaking our minds and sharing research and sharing our products of our artistry. But I want to keep that present, and thanks to Amanda just for helping to think that through this afternoon. Here we are.
I have one more question for our panel before we move to conversation between our panel and our audience. You know, I'm really struck, Sarah, as you were talking about the absence of trans and lesbian in the exhibit and thinking about the importance of having an ally like Laura. I'm thinking about PJ D'Amico, who is the executive director of Redline, who's an amazing ally for issues around girls and women.
Yay,
And I think about ways in which each of us, when we are really thinking about who's not in the room, who's missing, how we stand in solidarity and are allies to one another. And so talk to me about the importance of men in this conversation, the importance of men as our allies in creating the kinds of communities that we want to see, those hopeful places as opposed to some of the places of shadow and darkness that we've been reflecting on. And I'm seeing head nods, so Sarah, come on, you're going to go in there first.
I think that we really have to have these things in a shared space with men and women and this diverse, rich, group of people. I think if we're, I guess, putting blame on men for, our problems and how we're repressed or whatever, that's, sometimes might be the case, but certainly I'm lucky to be the person that I am because of all of the men in my life, and I value their support, and I value, and I depend actually a great deal on my brother and my father to be wonderful supporters of me and my life, and because they're the people I still feel like, and maybe this is my insecurity, but that in certain situations, they're the ones that are listened to, much more so than I am. And for them to be able to stand up and have my back, you know, is invaluable.
Well, and that's why, I mean, the ally is so important, because the ally is someone who has, for whatever reasons, right, that power as viewed by, you know, has that majority power, has that voice, can say those things on behalf of those of us who may not be seen as powerful, and can create that dialogue. So I totally appreciate that.
Yeah, and people like PJ who recognize it and are so gracious to include and offer opportunities like, you know, this exhibition and so many things like that, where they can still be the wonderful, powerful men that they are, but gracefully step aside and say, I can't be here without you as well. And I wish that it wasn't such a struggle, like it had to be one or the other. I wish that more people, women and men, understood that partnership.
They are half the sky after all.
They are half the sky. I guess I would segue from this to opening up the conversation to just say, I've been told, I thought my loud Italian voice would permeate to the back of the gallery. Thank you, Melanie. To say, for us to think about the ways in which we do show up or can show up as allies to one another. You know, having the college sponsor this exhibit was a way in which I thought we needed to be an ally. It was a way of expressing a value around elevating the conversation around violence so that we could, in fact, shed light and come to understanding, build alliances, create solutions. And so as I open it up to each of you to now join us in conversation, I do want you to think about your role as an ally, whether it's someone who is a white person, an ally with a person of color, whether it's someone who's straight, who is allied with a gay, lesbian, or trans brother or sister, whether we do that around faith, in whatever way we do that. I'm particularly feeling these days as I watch my parents age about being an ally to those who are older. There are many ways we can do this. We do have several of the Women's College staff who have microphones at the ready, and so if you'd raise your hand, we have one right here, Liz, and then we'll move on from there.
Hello everyone, I'm Melissa Torrey, and I just wanted to touch base on the men as allies. I think that what's important is for us to recognize that the issues that are men issues, if men are committing the crimes of rape and men have this power, how do we change their mind, and how do we make sure that they have the support system in place and the knowledge in place that changes their mind about however or wherever they learned these patterns of behavior. And I think that's a really important conversation that we need to be having, something that we need to talk about, but we don't always think about, that it really is a man issue, not so much a woman's issue.
I'd love to address that if I could. I think that in this instance, in this issue, like any other, whether it be an off-color joke that we hear, and or racist joke or remark, and we are told again and again that silence is not okay, that we need to speak up. It doesn't have to be rude, it doesn't have to be a fight, but we need to speak up. I do wish that not only women, but also men, when they see or hear something like that happen, when they see or hear women being objectified or joked around and put down, I wish they would say something. I will share with you an experience that I had a few months ago in New York City. I was sitting at a restaurant with a man, a leader in the community, and 3 other women, all also leaders in the community, very educated, very well known. And another man from across the street, across the restaurant, yelled, "Hey," to the man that we were having lunch with, "I see you sitting there with your harem." The women at the table took a deep breath, and we were all like, "Oh." And because we were being hosted by the gentleman at the table, and I'm sure for other reasons, insecurity or whatever, we wanted to be polite, no one said anything. No one said anything. I wish he had. I wish I had. I wish I knew what to say. None of us did, and my daughter was one of those women at 26. And it was a horrible experience, and for her and for me to have her experience that. In the United States, in 21st century, I had to apologize to her. I felt so bad. We all felt objectified. And it is in these incendiary ways that I think today we are harmed a lot more even, in worse ways. And we're shamed. That's a way that I think, one of the biggest ways that we can all stand up and say, that wasn't okay. That wasn't okay. So,
if I could piggyback on that real quick, I think this isn't a man's issue or a woman's issue. This truly is society's issue, and I think we really do need to break down that gender separation, because I think that does tend to put us on different sides. But there's an interesting study. Can you tell I like the research? There was an interesting study where a lot of these college men were interviewed. They didn't realize they were actually raping women. And what I mean by that is when they broke down what they did and explained what they did, they said, well, of course I kept giving her drinks, and of course she wiggled, and that helped take the shirt off, and well, of course she resisted, but that's what she likes. That's what women want. When I kept listening to these interviews, what it came down to was education, information, knowledge. Talk to your young boys, talk to college students. And more colleges across the country are educating their female and male population. Safety is more than just walking in numbers. It is about understanding what's going on. And I think as long as we continue that and keep having these conversations and similar conversations, more and more people will start to understand what's really going on.
And then the last piggyback, you start preschoolers and you start with grade school boys, and you empower and stand beside men like PJ to talk to, at the risk of putting him on the spot. I haven't met you, sorry. But empower men to talk to other men. From my classroom experiences, I can spout off all the statistics and all these things that we understand. But the men listen to their male classmates. They listen to their brothers. They listen to their uncles. They listen to their dads. And there are programs that are all over the country that have some of this prevention training with athletes, with military, that starts at a much younger age than most of us would suspect.
Good evening. My name is Linda Salon, and first of all, to address the issue about the inclusion of men, I just wanted to mention that the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence is hosting the 13th annual, I believe, conference here in Denver, Colorado, starting this weekend, and it is in association with NOMAS, which is the National Organization of Men Against Sexism. So men are getting involved definitely. What I really wanted to say though was I had the privilege of being in the first cohort of the program on domestic violence from the School of Public Affairs at the University of Colorado, Denver. And that was in 2000. It's 12 years later, and I'm very saddened that we are still talking about this in the same way, unfortunately. And I think the basis of it is, and why I was so intrigued about coming to this event, the title, Democracy Betrayed, is that our institutions are not democratic. They truly are not, because they're based on parental structure. a structure that perpetuates oppression. I work in a bureaucracy. When I see people that are at the top who are very elitist, they are oppressive to anyone who is below them if they are not conscious of that. And mostly they are women that are below those that are in this structure. The secretaries, the clerks, they're the ones that are the majority in these kinds of structures. One of the bases of this is, though, I believe, that our leadership programs, and I'm going to ask the Dean of the Women's College this question, continues to teach leadership as an elitist perspective, from a elitist perspective, that expertise is the goal, that having a sense of power because you have knowledge, rather than learning that knowledge is a responsibility and power is a responsibility and that all of us should share it. That should be a woman's type of leadership. And I wanted to ask if that's something that you think about and talk about at the Women's College.
Well, I don't know. I have a lot of students. I'm seeing head nods. Do we talk about that? You know, one of the reasons that this partnership with Redline is so important to us, and one of the reasons the sponsorship of this exhibit is so important to us, is that we talk about leadership as not positional. Now, granted, what we hear a lot is that if more women and people of color were in positional leadership roles, some things might change. And in fact, our college right now has a research team led by one of our professors that is looking at where women sit in positional leadership roles around the country in any number of sectors. And what we do know, what we do see, is that there's a greater propensity for those individuals, women and people of color, to bring more women and people of color into leadership roles. So I'm not knocking positional leadership, nor am I trying to comment on whether it's elitist or not. But we do know that positional leadership can create change. But with our students and our alums, who I see doing head nods, what we talk about is the importance of being leaders in the communities where they live, in the communities where they work, and in the communities where they engage. There's a great book, and it's called Tempered Radicals. And it's written by a woman named Deborah Meyerson, and I've used this in some of my coursework at the Women's College. And Tempered Radicals, it's a great illustration. Tempered Radicals are men and women who want to change their organizations. They want to rock the boat, but they don't want to fall out. And it's all stories about men and women who take the opportunity, whether in allyship with one another or whether it's through their own personal conviction, to create change from wherever they sit in the organization. And I think that the Redline philosophy of having artists here creating art, artists from our community, having this exhibit which has engaged the community in so many different ways. Louise was just telling me about something that had happened here recently that looked at gang violence and bringing in community members to talk about that. I mean, to me, this is the kind of leadership that we are all about exhibiting. And so I thank you for your question. I don't know that any organization is perfect, but I think there are some of us who are trying to lead from where we sit. And so thank you to the students and alums I see nodding their heads, and you can talk to them afterwards to see if I'm telling the truth. We need to get over here for some questions to this side. And this woman over here in the white sweater, woo, has been raising her hand. I love it. Assertive. Go.
Hi, my name is Tara Smith, and I am an artist, and I'm involved in community projects and things. And I have a comment for Sarah about your album. I love that project, and I actually put a piece of paper on it, and I would encourage everyone to check that out, because it's a really powerful experience. And I have a question for Anjanette. I'm currently involved with a project, an art project, regarding human trafficking. And in my studio practice, I have found that it is a very issue in a lot of cases. And I've found a couple of organizations within Colorado, I empathize and COPA, that are advocating for human trafficking. But I was also wondering if you could comment to everybody here on how they can learn more about human trafficking, where they can go to find more information, and also other organizations that you know of that are also working really hard to free these people, because there's a lot out there. It would be great if people could hear about it.
Great question.
So thank you, Tara, for your question and your commitment to learning more about the issue. And she did name off 2 organizations, one that does a lot of public awareness, I empathize, and COBA is the grant manager for the Colorado Network to End Human Trafficking, which is the service provider network. And so just to share just a quick response, when we look at human trafficking, we look from LCHT's perspective really comprehensively. So part of my question would be, what parts are you interested in? Are you interested in prevention, where you talk with young men about healthy relationships? Or do you train law enforcement? There's protection, which is victim services, whether that be crisis or long-term. You're talking prosecution. Do you want to know about the local law enforcement units, including VICE and FBI and sheriff's departments working on the issue? And then the other P is partnership. How do they all coordinate with each other so that they're not tripping on each other and that they're being really respectful of that survivor's experience? I will humbly make that pitch to share our website, www.combathumantrafficking.org, which is for the Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking. We feature lengthy reading resource lists. 1. 2, we also highlight and feature organizations. In addition to COVA and I Empathize, you have Praxis, who does outreach with youth experiencing homelessness. You have Rocky Mountain Immigrant Advocacy Network, who does outreach in the GEO Detention Center for people who are potentially being deported. You have Colorado Legal Services, who does migrant farm worker outreach in the different parts of Colorado. Our organization does training. We've trained over 13,000 law enforcement and service providers, and we conduct research. And we also have a leadership development program, one of which our participants, Krasi, is here with us tonight, where we've had about 80 leaders come through, frankly, some of the modeling that I've learned from Dean Gangone over the years. So there are many ways that people can slot in, but I would start with, what is your passion? What part of this issue would you like to learn about? And they're there. Thank you. And I'm happy to chat with you later.
Hello, my name is Sandra Bea, and I'm from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So I would like to agree with Dr. Lin about the mental status, the girls who are getting married at 13 or 14 years old, because they're still doing that in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And that's actually why I did create my non-profit organization to help girls stay in school. So my question to Dr. and Janet is, I started with 6 girls, now I have 100 girls. Do you think that this is going to help to decrease the violence against women? Do you think education is going to help? Because that was my goal, to help them. But do you think I'm on the right track?
Absolutely. And it was, absolutely. So in terms of this work, so much comes down to educating young women about their own sense of power, their own sense of place, and letting them know about their own sense of vulnerability. Education becomes that platform because they have got a role model in you, a mentor in you, to help give that message. So I thank you for the work that you're doing. I can see these young women looking up to you, and you delivering that message helps to do that empowerment and helps to open that door to talk about places where violence can enter in and where education and knowledge can help them problem solve and think through and find allies. All of that, honestly, is also in the embodiment of you as that educator. So I don't want to just focus on the girls learning. You'll give them those tools and resources, but don't discount the power of you, us, all of us talking about these issues. We help to make it reachable, tangible, and they'll be open to ask you other questions that go well beyond the curriculum that you set up for them. So I also want to underscore this power of community and power of women that can't be undermined. That's powerful. So yes, absolutely, I will always stand on a chair to say education is one of the places where that is, but some of that is also embodied in you. So keep going.
I'll take, if there's one final question, women's college students and alums. I'm going to put you on the spot. There we go. We'll claim you.
Hi, my name is Megan Morris, and I want to say thank you to all of you for sharing. And I have been ruminating on the topic, the title of this conversation, and posing this question to everyone. The title being Democracy Betrayed. And as I listened to everyone, I started to think about, the history of Iran and the democratic aspirations that began in 1950 and have continued on, and the aspirations of individuals that are other or not part of the demos, whether it's because of their sexuality or because of their legal status in this country or because of how they are represented in the media. So my question is, are we really asking if democracy has been betrayed, or is it that democracy is yet to be actualized? And I pose that question to all of you. Wow.
Nice.
I'll start. I'm not sure that it has been entirely betrayed. I think that because there's so many people on the planet and people are always working towards democracy, it will never be fully betrayed as long as there are people still working on it. However, a very strong example of this, I feel like, is the Violence Against Women Act is supposed to be reauthorized this year. So the Senate has put in provisions to protect illegal immigrants, Native American women, trans and lesbian women. The House has come up with their own, it's essentially the same act, but it doesn't have those provisions in it. And the House and Senate have now been fighting, and they can't come to an agreement, so it's been stalled. And so what will happen if they don't reach an agreement by the end of the session? It will have pretty terrible consequences for everyone. And for me, I have a problem with other political or, I guess, religious groups coming in and even with this immigration thing, when they're pursuing one really what they think is a straight and narrow track, for one thing, it trickles down and it affects all of these other things also. And so in that sense, that's where I feel like the betrayal comes from. And I'm not even sure people are necessarily aware that that's happening. And it's something that I wish we could educate everyone on. And so that's my example of that.
That's great. I feel that democracy has both not been quite realized and also betrayed. And I'm sorry that's such a cynic point of view. I don't mean it to be. I don't mean it to be. It's only that my thinking is so grand. I want so much more for all of us than we have for our daughters, for our sons. I want so much more that I think we have a way to go yet. And it's just frustrating to see that, as far as I'm concerned, there's no reason why we can't have arrived, for the most part at least. I agree with Sarah. It's never that we will fully arrive. It'll always be a work in progress. But we're not even close yet. So it's just frustrating.
I think I'm even more of a cynic in the sense of I don't think it can ever actually be actualized, because I think it is a living, breathing thing. I think democracy, there's an ebb and a flow, and I think we have the democracy that we allow. And if we don't like it, we as a society have to change it. And I realize that I make that sound very easy, but I honestly believe you get the government you deserve, you get the government you allow. And I think the democracy is going to continue to grow and change as we as a society continue to grow and change. And if I don't like something I see, I do what I can, and as I was taught at the Women's College as a leader, to just change my little world, change my little community. If that just means it's my block, then so be it. But I do what I can to make that change. But I don't think democracy can be actualized or have a finite point, because we as a society and we as humans continually grow and change. But I realize that's very cynical of me as well.
I fall into those, and then I get
Good for you. Good for
I just
you.
keep going. I don't look at it. I just keep going.
I actually don't think that that's cynical at all. I mean, I think that what you're saying is that we have the responsibility to create the democracy that we want to see. And I think that we are in a time when there appears to be so much polarization that so many of us sit back and ask ourselves, can I really make a difference? And so if anything, the message tonight is you absolutely can make a difference. This conversation makes a difference. Our consideration of our country and its particular democracy. There are other countries that express democracy in other ways, but it is the rare country that has taken democracy and taken everyone under its umbrella. I don't know, because I am not a political scientist now. I was as an undergraduate, but I do believe, and I know there's a few constitutional lawyers in the room, and they will correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that South Africa might still be the only country that explicitly talks about the depth and breadth of its diverse population and the way in which it serves to serve that diversity. We do have a responsibility as individuals and as a community. And so I must wrap us up, if you will. And that does not mean that you won't have time to interact with our thought leaders following. We invite you to stay to view the exhibit. We invite you to have a little more water or wine or a little bit to eat. Please stay. This is an amazing exhibit. It will not be in our community much longer. A couple of things, if I might, just because I have to. It's a dean thing. You have to get to some of the details before you let people go. There is a card at your chair that is an opportunity to refer that woman that you know to the Women's College, and as an incentive, we'd like to pay for one of her credits. And so if you know a woman who would like to come to the Women's College, please send this card to her and put your name on it and her name on it. The second is that as we ally with organizations like Redline, we also reach out to other organizations that are doing good work. There is a booth at the front of the gallery made by survivors. Dr. Deborah Rouse is here. Deborah, could you raise your hand? Deborah's right back here. Deborah is an amazing woman, a naturopathic doctor by vocation and by avocation, a board member of Made by Survivors. And let me tell you about their mission. Their mission is to end slavery through economic empowerment and education, giving survivors of trafficking the tools they need to build safe, independent, slavery-free lives. So Deborah, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I want to thank again Redline Gallery, and I want to especially thank the students and alums of the Women's College and the faculty and staff who are here. You make everything that the Women's College does real. So thank you for who you are, for your good work in our community, and again, thank you to our thought leaders. Please, a round of applause for our